All right, we've got a green light, so I'll call the Public Works Board of July 11th, 2023 to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Picard,
Here.
Mr. White, Mr. Waters,
Here.
Mr. Palachuk,
Here.
Mr. Beagle, Ms. Schmager.
Here.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 3, correction and or approval of the minutes of our May 9th meeting. Anybody wish to make any corrections or make a motion?
I move approval of the minutes of May 9th, 2023.
Second.
Motion and second. All those then in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Next is item 4, questions and public comment. I don't see anybody in the building here. I don't think there's anybody online. If there is, please speak up. If not, we'll move on to item 5, Director's Report.
Thanks. So we have 2 items on the report. The first one is to give an update on some of the electric blips that residents may have been experiencing over the last several months. And these are intermittent blips in service. It's not shutting down the entire system. The utility's been experiencing these, and they've isolated to a single circuit at this point. Staff has worked with a vendor and a consultant to explore and test that circuit, and in particular at the Tyranny substation. And currently that circuit breaker is taken offline from the system itself, and it's being tested. It is currently testing well, which is good news and bad news. The good news is that it's testing well. The bad news is it's not isolating the problem. If the circuit breaker continues to function the way it is in this test, then they will start applying a partial load from the residents to that circuit once again. So we're going to ask the public to provide information if they start seeing the blips again, or if they see them in the meantime. In the meantime, the utility has also put out additional test points throughout the circuit that is in question, so that if the blips do occur again, they're able to isolate them a little bit more quickly. The other thing that the staff has been doing is, as a preventative measure, is they have been working not only with the crew, but also with a contractor to do tree trimming along much of the overhead lines in that particular circuit in particular first. Again, that's a preventative maintenance, and as a caution, trying to work in the area that's been causing the problem. The utility will continue to ask for the public's assistance by notifying the utility through the phone number 920-648-4026 or through the website. And please keep in mind that just posting to social media doesn't necessarily mean that utility staff is getting the details that they need in a particularly timely manner to kind of solve this problem. It's been a little tricky. The good news is it hasn't really happened lately since we've taken that circuit breaker offline. The bad news as well is that it's now testing, the circuit breaker is not testing bad. Any questions with that item? We will report if we find out more in the near future, but they are looking. The second item is Milton Street walkthrough. At the council work session, it was decided by council prior to their next council meeting next Tuesday, at 6:15, July 18th, the council will do a walkthrough at Milton Street, which, if you recall, is the 2024 construction project currently in the CIP program. The walkthrough, obviously the council is inviting the Public Works Board to that walkthrough. If you'd like to attend, with the idea that as we move into capital improvement planning discussions next month, and ultimately the first round of budgeting in September, that will be probably a topic for discussion of whether it stays in the CIP or potentially moves into a later year.
Can you please share again when that walkthrough is scheduled?
Sure. Tuesday, July 18th at 6:15 PM. It will-
6:15?
6:15 PM.
Okay.
It will be a rather quick, probably, walkthrough because the council does have a 7 o'clock meeting time.
And they're meeting at,
On-site between Main and Ferry, probably likely near Main Street, and then walking toward Ferry.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on that one?
Maybe about a half hour.
And if it's storming, it'll be shorter. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else for the report?
Nope. Okay, then, moving on then, if it's all right with everybody else on the board, we will move item 7 up ahead of item 6 so that the person can get to another meeting. So if it's okay with everybody, our next item will be discussion recommendation on water utility cost of service study.
John, if you're ready.
Sure am. Let me share my screen here and I can put the analysis up. Good evening, everybody. John Cameron with Ellers. We were engaged to perform a 5-year cash flow analysis for the water utility. So what I'd like to do this evening is just walk through some of the highlights of the analysis and talk about some of our initial recommendations as it pertains to really the current year and then kind of what we're seeing in order to fund the capital improvement projects that are in the city's capital improvement plan as it relates to the water utility over the next 5 years. Just to start with a historical perspective, going back to 2018 out through the current 2023 budget year, just looking at the water utilities financial performance on a cash basis and on a utility basis. So in the world of utility rates, when we talk about what is referred to as the revenue requirement for the utility, realistically what we're meaning with that statement is the amount of money that we need to generate from user rates in order to operate the utility from both an operation and maintenance standpoint as well as from a capital standpoint. And that can be looked at and defined 2 different ways. One is on a cash basis. The other is on a utility basis, which is how the Wisconsin Public Service Commission would look at the utilities' financial performance in the conjunction with a utility rate case. So on a cash basis, really, realistically, what we're looking at is, are your user rates sufficient to recover your operating and maintenance expenses, your annual debt service payments, and then any cash-funded capital expenses that would be paid not with the issuance of debt, but through cash funding. And just kind of walking from left to right, so you see from 2018 out through 2023, the bars coming across the page in orange represent the annual operating and maintenance expenses out through 2021 are audited expenses through 2022 are the preliminary audit, now I think finalized audited numbers, and then for 2023 is the budgeted operating and maintenance expenses. The bar in tan color or salmon color is your annual principal and interest payments on existing debt allocated to the water utility, and then the green bar represents any cash funded capital expenses that occurred in any one calendar year. So the line in purple going across the page represents the annual revenue requirement. And what you can see historically, the line in blue is the actual amount of user rate revenues for water rates over time. So the water utility, as I'm sure most folks are aware, has gone through a number of different water rate cases over the last several years. And I think what we're seeing here is that, on a cash basis, these water rate increases really are having the desired effect where our user rate revenue going into our 2023 budget year is above our revenue requirement line for that year. When we look at things on a utility basis, which would be recovering the same operating and maintenance expenses for the utility, but instead of our existing debt service payments and any cash funded capital, looking at recovering our depreciation and a rate of return, which on a cash basis need to be sufficient to make our annual debt service payments and pay for any cash funded capital expenses. But as we look at this historically, the user rate revenues have fallen below our revenue requirement line. And really it wasn't until about 2021 that we started to come above that line in terms of our user revenues now being sufficient to meet the expenses of the utility on a utility-based method. And going into 2023, we're really right on top of the revenue requirement for the utility in terms of our existing expenses. So that's a real positive for the utility over the last several years. What we would note, and I'm going to jump around a little bit on the analysis, but happy to answer questions after I get through with my presentation here. The utility has approximately $3.5 million of planned capital expenses out through 2027. Obviously, you're well underway with your 2023 projects, and those projects were borrowed for this year. But going out 24, 25, 26, and 27, what the analysis is showing, at least in the present form, is the need to borrow on a revenue bond basis for those planned capital improvement projects. Although one of the things that I'll note going into 2026 and 2027 is that as the utility continues to perform financially, and if some of the rate adjustments we'll talk about this evening are followed, that may negate some of the borrowings that are shown in these out years. But preliminary, we're looking at about $3.5 million of planned capital improvement expenses. In terms of the cash flow analysis for the utility, what's recommended is that for this current year, the utility consider a simplified water rate increase. So in the world of water rates in Wisconsin, any sort of rate adjustment on the water side is subject to Public Service Commission review and approval. There are generally two types of rate increases, a simplified increase and a conventional rate increase. The simplified increase in 2023 that Public Service Commission has approved is an 8% increase, which is the highest that I've ever seen in terms of a simplified increase. And that the process, as its name implies, really is fairly simplistic. There's an online form that is filled out. There's a notification process to your customers, either through mailing or through publication in the local paper. Once that is approved, Public Service Commission issues an order approving the new rates, and you select an implementation date and move forward. And the process itself generally takes, at the short end, 45 days from start to finish, but really it can go a little bit longer than that, as you usually try to put your implementation date in line with your next billing date, so you don't have to prorate user rates. So the utility is eligible for a simplified increase. We would recommend that you take advantage of that, as you do not have to go through a conventional case process to get that 8%. Going through a conventional rate case right now takes anywhere between 9 to 12 months to get from start to finish through the Public Service Commission's application process, so it is rather lengthy, whereas the simplified increase obviously is much shorter. The good news is beyond that, we're really not seeing the need for another rate increase, even with the planned capital improvement projects that you have in your CIP until 2026. And at that point, we're showing the need for another simplified increase. I will say the simplified increases are evaluated in terms of what those percentages will be on an annual basis by the Public Service Commission. Historically, they've been right around 3%. But with inflation coming up last year, it went from 3% to 4.5%. This year, it went from 4.5% to 8%. So where it goes in the future, I think is anybody's best guess. If inflation does start to come back down and interest rates start coming back down, I would imagine we'd see simplified increases coming back towards that 3% increase range. So it's possible you may need a conventional case between now and 2026. But if those simplified increases stay at 8%, if you qualify, which we show you would in 2026, that's realistically what it would mean in that year. In terms of the impact on typical residential utility bill, this is just the water side of it. What it would mean for 2023 is an increase per month of about $3.35, or about $40 for the year. And obviously you're well into the year, so you have to kind of take that, as for a full calendar year. In 2026, an 8% increase would equate to about a $3.61 impact to the average monthly bill on the water side. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the analysis. I think what we would note in general is that really kudos to the city for staying on track with planned rate increases over the last several years. That hard work seems to have paid off. What we would show is staying in line with the simplified increases in 2023 and again in 2026. So happy to turn it back over for any questions.
Yes.
I have two questions. The first one I'm going to ask is back on page 4, your graphs on cash basis and utility basis. I'm just curious to know, how would you characterize this performance versus other water utilities?
Sure. Well, normally when we get involved with looking at a cash flow analysis, it's usually because they've got the utility either hasn't been keeping up with rate increases or has some major capital improvement projects. So in a lot of cases, when we're involved in looking at the historical analysis, it's not quite as good as what we're seeing here. And what I would note is that, historically, you were below, the utility was below the line, but what we are seeing on a cash basis, and certainly on a more of a utility-based method where we're looking at depreciation and rate of return, is that, these increases to user rates and really what the utility has been doing financially over the last several years really is paying off. So I think, you're really in a good position as you look at this next 5-year set of capital improvements.
Thank you.
Do you have two questions? Or?
Yes, I had a second question. Now on to the last chart where you were showing the simplified rate case at 8%. Could you please clarify again, how did you arrive at 8%? Why not 6? Why not 5? Is there a particular financial target? I just would like a little more insight into that particular value, how that was derived.
So that is a PSC prescribed percentage increase. So any utility that is eligible for a simplified increase in 2023, it is 8%. So you can't say we want, we get 8, but we really want 6 or we want 5 or 3. If you qualify for a simplified increase, it is an across the board 8% increase to your fixed charge, your public fire protection charge, which is also fixed based on the size of the meter, and your volumetric rates. And that is based on really just inflation and where existing interest rates are. So the PSC annually sets that percentage increase and then publishes it out to all utilities across the state, saying this is what it will be for this calendar year.
Thank you. I know you had shared that, it just wasn't connecting, so thank you.
No problem.
So just kind of a small follow-on on that, the 8% is applied across the board to all the different rates, categories, et cetera, correct?
It is. Correct.
Yep, thanks.
Yep, no problem.
Any other questions for John?
I do. On process, it said 9 to 12 months. Now, is that something that if you start now, that this would take in, if this is approved, it goes into effect by mid-2024? Is that what you're
No,
talking about?
that's if you had to go through a conventional rate case process, it takes anywhere between 9 to 12 months. Simplified increase is a minimum of 45 days. So it's much faster, much easier, much easier on staff to be able to do. So, to any utility that is eligible, our recommendation has been you should take this if you qualify.
Okay, thank you.
Much quicker, much easier. My guess is in 2024, it's going to start to come back down off of that 8%. So to the extent that you can qualify for it, which you do, you should wholeheartedly consider taking advantage of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for John? Nope.
Nope, I'm good.
All right, then would anybody care to make a motion for perhaps recommending this to water? I don't know, I guess it'd be the service study, or would it be the rate?
I think the most appropriate motion would be a motion to recommend to the city council that they conduct a simplified rate case for the water utility.
Okay.
All right,
Well, I will make a motion for the city to apply the simplified rate case for the water utility.
I'll second that.
all right, we have a motion and a second on that, on this water utility rate case of 8%. Is there any further discussion on this?
I just want to clarify that that's for a 2023 study. Is that what we're looking at here?
Right, so it's effective as soon as the PSC completes the simplified review process. So it would go into effect at minimum 45 days from the city council sending the application to the PSC.
Okay.
So sometime in 2023, it will take effect.
Okay.
All right, anybody else, anything else? All right, seeing not, roll call, please.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
Mr. Polachek?
Aye.
Ms. Schmager?
Aye.
Mr. Picard?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, thank you, John. Then we're moving backwards to item 6, discussion recommendation on electric utility cost of service study.
Unfortunately, there's no simplified rate case for electric, so it's going to be a long process.
So like 9 to 12 months?
I would say, yes, between 6 and 12 months. So, my name's Nicole Gould. I'm with WPPI Energy. I'm part of the electric rate department at WPPI. This is one of the services that we do for our members. If the utility were to pay for this service outside on its own to pull together a rate application, you could probably expect an expense anywhere from $15,000 to $30,000. So it's a nice service that's provided at no cost to the member. You will receive bills, however, from the PSC during the review process. So just a heads up on that. There are several steps that are involved in a rate application. We pull together the application itself. We submit it to the Public Service Commission on your behalf. We notify customers of the proposed increase in rates. This is done through an insert which appears in the customer's bills. The PSC reviews the application, again, takes between 6 to 12 months. A public hearing is held. This is done virtually at this time. There's no longer an in-person hearing. And then, as with water, you choose the effective date for the new rates to go into effect, and typically this lines up with the meter reads for the billing. There's 3 parts to an electric rate application. So there's the revenue requirement, how much revenue does the utility need? There's the cost of service study, where we evaluate the revenues by rate class, and obviously the cost to serve varies by customer type and their usage patterns. And finally, the third part is the rate design, how we collect the revenue from the customers. We try to collect as much of the fixed charges through fixed rates, and we try to send price signals to the customers appropriately through on and off peak energy charges, et cetera. On page 4, this is an income statement for the test year 2023. Based on your operating and capital budgets, we're projecting that the utility will earn a margin or rate of return of 4.35%. So the utility is requesting a rate increase of 3.69%, or $320,445, and this is to earn a fair margin of 7%. The PSC determines what percentage you can earn, and that's based on a municipal bond index. There are several factors that are considered in your rate design. We look at your cost of service study results. We try to recover the fixed costs through the fixed charges. We compare with the closest investor-owned utility, which in this case is WEBCO. We look at the impact on individual customer bills, especially for CP1 and above. And then we also look at price incentives. How could we lower the cost of electricity to an individual customer that might impact the overall system as well? The next page is a chart that takes a look at the present revenues and compares them to your cost of service study results. So this is just one of the factors that we take into consideration when we look at the rate design. And on page 7, we have the proposed rate design by rate class. So we take a look at the present revenues for the test year and compare them directly to the proposed. So overall, a reminder that the PSC ultimately determines the rates. So this is just a proposal on our part. The last rate increase was done in January of 2015. At that time, the utility had requested over $1 million, or a 14% increase. They were granted about $800,000, or 11% at that time. And I think that was when you were doing a significant amount of work connecting the lake loop. So, and when you consider that a rate study or a rate increase has not occurred in over 8 years, I think the utility is doing fairly well. So, in maintaining cost-effective rates for its customers. So if you take a look at the monthly comparisons, the average residential customer that uses 615 kilowatt hours would see an increase of $3.68 in their bill, or about 4.1%. The average commercial customer uses 1,765 kilowatt hours. They would see an increase of $16.88 per month, or 7.2%. When we did the cost of service study, one of the things that we looked at was your unbundled rate for residential customers. So the cost of setting up an individual residential customer is $39.25 at this time. Obviously, you're not going to recover that full cost, but when you consider your proposed customer charge is only $13, customers are getting quite a benefit. The next chart is a cost or a comparison of your proposed revenue to WEBCO. This table shows you're almost 19% below the investor-owned utility rates. This is based on WEBCO's rates effective January 1 of 2023. Included in that is an environmental control charge, which was implemented in December of 2022. Kind of going back to that customer charge, residential customer charge again, if you look at what WEBCO is charging for their residential customer charge, it's $15. This is common with many investor-owned utilities. MG&E is at $15, and also WPS is at $17.92. The next chart that you have is just some common thresholds for residential and general service customers. So you can see the impact of a lower usage customer compared to a higher usage customer in your residential and your general service categories. And again, when you look at that average customer, for residential, they use 615 kilowatt hours. And average commercial is 1765. The next chart included is a look at your CP1 customers, or small power. Overall, the rate class itself goes up 1.42%. The minimum increase to a customer in the CP1 rate class is 0.29%, and the maximum is 4.08%. And again, it depends on their individual characteristics. We did keep an energy limiter in place, which does help protect some of those low load factor customers from paying too much on a per kilowatt hour basis. The next chart takes a look at the CP2, or the large power customers. The overall increase is 2.01%. The minimum impact to an individual customer is 0.3%. The maximum is 10.85, and this is a customer with an extremely low load factor. One thing to point out in the rate design, one of the things that I did for CP2, the only thing that's changing with their rate is the demand. This is something that the customer has more control over their bill. And so hopefully your energy service manager can work with those customers to perhaps find solutions that might lower their bill and lower the system overall as well. The last pages are just kind of a summary of the rates, the present rates to proposed rates. It just breaks it down in a simple manner of customer charges and energy charges. If you notice, the PCAC also gets reset to 0 at the time of a rate case. So this means you will have a new U factor, which is used in determining your PCAC. And that gets implemented at the same time that the new rates go into effect. That was all I had. That was a really brief look at your rate application process. And I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'd be happy to hear them.
Greg?
So Nicole, we have a residential customer charge spreadsheet that was handed out. There's option 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
What you presented tonight was option 1.
Yeah, that is what we would suggest to the utility. The customer charge at $13. Right now, the residential customer is at $10. Again, this is even proposed at $13. You're well below what investor-owned utilities are at, being at $15 to $18 in their customer charge. And really, this protects the utility. As more distributed generation comes into play, it assures the utility that they can recover their fixed costs or fixed charges. And as I showed the unbundled rate, you know, you're close to $40 to set up a customer. You want to collect as much of that through a fixed charge as possible.
So a little background, Greg.
Yeah.
Just before the last month's meeting that was canceled, I asked Paul Hermanson to explain, or what, I asked them basically why the fixed charge should go up 30% and the variable charge for residential go up 0.9%. And it's, you know, as you just heard from Nicole, that's the reasoning. I don't agree with that. We can discuss that later, but that's the background of why we have this option 1, 2, 3.
So with option 1, residential's going up 30%. Commercial's going up 17.6%, I guess.
This
the way
is
I look
all
at it.
related to residential, option 1, 2, and 3. And what I did was provide a revenue neutral look at your residential customer charges. So it shows the customer charge and what you could propose it at to the PSC, and the energy charge for residential and what you could propose it at. All 3 scenarios should collect about the same amount of revenue. What happens, it's really a political issue right now, the customer charge, in terms of equity or being equitable to customers and affordable to customers. In essence, though, the utilities costs are what they are. You know, it's close to $40 so that a customer can turn the light switch on or off at any time, 24/7. You have a number of seasonal customers and in Lake Mills as well. It's in terms of fairness and protecting the utility, I would vote for option number 1.
So that puts the burden of the rate increases, I guess, more on the upfront charges than the energy usage charges? Is that how I'm looking at this?
Yeah, it puts the majority of the increase in the customer charge. And again, the PSC will ultimately determine the rates. This is just what we're proposing to the PSC. They may come up with a different solution to this.
Do they usually use the proposal, or do they?
No, they come up independently with their own decision. And I would say customer charge is something that's closely scrutinized, So
on this option 3 on the title line there, it says increase customer charge and energy charge by 6.65%, whereas the overall rate increase is around 3.7%, I believe, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
So is that saying?
It's just how the math turned out to make a revenue neutral proposal, so.
Is that saying?
So your residential customer, or your residential rate class is going up 4.1% in our proposal.
So how does the 4.1 relate to the 6.65?
That's how much I had to increase the customer charge and how much I had to increase. You wanted both things to go up the same percentage.
Which I would
and
thought would be 4.1%.
It doesn't work out that way. The revenue goes up 4.1%. The individual rate components go up 6.6. You have your PCAC that's also rolled in, and you were running, I believe it was like 0.013 for your PCAC. That gets reset to 0, so you have to make that up. So that's where the difference is coming in. So yeah, overall, your rate increase, your overall increase is a 3.7% or $320,445. And then we come up with a proposal of how much to increase each rate class. And residential was one particular rate class that you wanted some options to, and that's why we did that.
Anybody have other questions?
I did have one question.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Your high usage customers, are there load shed programs that they can enlist in that helps them to reduce some of their usage? Or is that, I know it's a little bit different, but can that impact what their rate increase would be?
Are you talking for residential customers
No,
or for large
for your
power?
larger power service users. Is that just not a non-factor with this particular?
So there are capacity programs that do exist for some of our large power customers. I did not research what Lake Mills, if they participate in any of those programs. But obviously, we have an energy service manager who's willing to work with your customers. If there's concerns over the potential rate increase. And as I pointed out, one of the things that we did in the rate design is we tried to put the majority of the increase in the demand charges, and this gives them more flexibility.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I think in simplified terms, the trend that Nicole has alluded to of capturing revenue through the fixed charge is largely tied to the cost of providing the opportunity for a user to flip their light switch and the light turns on, no matter how much they're going to use that electricity, is largely fixed. So there's a certain cost to providing electricity to customers. And so the capturing that through the fixed charge protects the utility from from fluctuations, from trends toward independently generated electricity, such as through solar panels, through more efficient appliances and things like that that result in lower electrical usage. But the infrastructure that needs to go in simply to allow the opportunity to use that electricity remains largely the same.
Right.
So that is why you see a trend towards capturing much of that through a customer service charge in order to protect against that. You're not required to do that. Obviously, you can increase usage, but as noted in the blurb under option 2, high usage customers do end up subsidizing low usage customers in that the cost of just making sure electricity is available to someone independent of how much they use the electricity does not change based on usage. And so that is the logic behind the fixed customer service charge. But ultimately, the design of how this board and ultimately the city council would like to organize that and how to collect that revenue is what you propose is up to you. The PSC ultimately looks at a number of factors as far as what does the utility need, what protects existing ratepayers, and what's in their best interest is what the PSC is charged with. And so that's why they go through their independent verification process to determine that users are being treated equitably across the utility among ratepayers. Is that fair, Nicole?
That's great. And I'd probably take it a step further even with option 2. Your year-round customers are subsidizing your seasonal customers because they're higher usage customers, right? So I would take it a step further and make that statement as well.
I have a question on attachment 4, schedule 3, page 9 of your updated presentation.
Attachment 4, schedule 2.
It's small on the paper.
Which one?
It's very hard to read on the paper.
Go ahead, just.
So if you notice, there's a table 1 and table 2. Table 1 is present versus proposed versus WEPCO. And if you look, yeah, so table 1,
Attachment 4, Schedule 3?
yes.
Okay, where you're looking at residential charges and general
Yes.
service charges?
Table 1, residential.
Yep,
The difference proposed, the proposal difference to WUPCO, the difference is negative, right? It's a negative 25% or a negative 28%, correct?
actually, WEBCO would be 25% higher than
Okay.
our rates. Yep,
All right. So at higher usages, WEPCO is even higher.
our rates are even more competitive, yes.
Okay. So, usage.
So what I'm hearing you say is that needs to be communicated to people. Is that,
No, no.
what am I missing here?
I would just say your residential rates are significantly below the investor-owned utilities. And that's something to take home, because when you tend to see inverted rate structures with the investor-owned utilities, and residential customers are paying quite a bit of their fair share when it comes to investor-owned.
So, because the difference is not constant as the kilowatt hours increases, it's an indication that the demand charge versus the usage charge is not matched between WEPCO and the
There's
proposal.
only a couple things involved in the rate component. You have a customer charge, an energy charge for us, and the PCAC. Those are the only rate components. You have to put since there's no demand bucket for the rates, you have to put it as much as possible in the fixed charge. So with WEBCO, they have a similar structure where it's just energy, customer charge, and then in this particular case, they have an environmental control charge, which is being applied. At this time, they don't have a fuel cost adjustment, but that's something that could potentially come into play for them as well.
So the proposed $13 charge is proportionately higher than the WEPCO charge if you ratio them accordingly. Yes, it's lower than WEPCO, but it's proportionately higher than WEPCO if you ratio the demand charge, the kilowatt hour charge, similarly, it's actually higher than WEPCO.
It's a fair proposal for the utility to request 13.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't disagree with it. I'm just saying, I'm just making a statement of
Yep.
fact.
Yep.
Why is a factor considered in rate design comparison with investor-owned utilities and not comparison with municipal-owned utilities?
Because if you're looking municipal-owned to municipal-owned, your distribution systems are unique. And so it's not truly an apples-to-apples comparison to look at other municipal-owned. We do provide such a comparison for the utility. We do something that's called financial benchmarking. And in that, we do look at similarly sized utilities, and that is something that we provide to your utility manager. So if that's something you're interested in looking at sometime, I would contact them.
So you said that the municipal utilities have different,
They have unique distribution systems.
is not the WEPCO distribution system also unique compared
Yes,
to the
but
Lake
it's
Mills
a much
distribution
more-
system?
It's also unique, but it's something that, it's a comparison that most people are interested in, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that's provided, and it's something that's, I believe, a requirement when we fill out the rate application with the Public Service Commission, so.
Well, I'm also interested in municipal to municipal comparisons. I don't see why it's, you know, in general, almost always, investor-owned is going to have a higher rate than municipals.
Yep.
So
Yep.
to me, it's a better benchmark to compare municipal to municipal
Yep.
versus municipal to investor-owned.
Yeah, and another tool that we do provide is a retail rate benchmark. And in that particular case, we look at other WPPI members and we compare kind of what's happening with rate design and retail rates. And that would be a comparison to other municipals as well. So both the retail rate benchmark and the financial benchmark might be something that you might be interested in then.
So the PSC also has a nice website for comparisons, correct?
They do have a spot where you compare residential rates.
So using that tool for comparing residential rates of our utility here in Lake Mills compared to the 80-plus other municipal utilities in the state of Wisconsin, ours ranked at 14%, meaning that 14% of other municipal utilities were higher than us, and 86% of other municipal utilities in the state were lower than us. So just another piece of information that I think is useful to have as perspective. Well, also the customer charges that we've been talking about, the average customer charge for municipals is just under $10 for the state of Wisconsin.
I would say that WPPI members are typically higher than that, and part of that is us advocating on behalf of WPPI members of the importance of the fixed charge and the importance of trying to recover your fixed costs through the fixed rate. So you will see WPPI members are higher.
So I come with a business background. In business, you're selling things, let's say widgets, and you sell a widget, you get so much money. You sell 10 widgets, you get so much more money. There's no fixed and variable cost. Businesses have also, just like utilities, significant fixed costs, whether it's buildings, electricity, capital. Capital equipment is huge, as is with utilities. Businesses must recover their fixed costs using variable income. It's something that many businesses do. It's not necessary to recover fixed costs with fixed key fees. So, like you said earlier, it's a different ways of looking at it. What's the goals? It's to match investor-owned utilities that are nearby to so that we can have people coming here and say, oh, we have good electric rates. So is it competitive with the IOUs? Is it what's best for the utility in terms of managing the utility? Is it what's best for the overall community? When I look at it, I think people have control of the kilowatt hours that they spend. So if that is higher and the fixed charge is lower, then it encourages conservation, which in general is an advantage to utilities because a huge part of utilities is capital investment, and by reducing that capital investment, by reducing demand, it saves everybody money, the customer and the utility. But different goals, different ideals. So I just wanted to provide some more input on that. Any further questions or comments?
While you were talking, Mark, I was able to look up some stuff real quick online.
Mhm.
And it came back that from a residential standpoint, Lake Mills is 7.43% lower than the Wisconsin average, but we're 2.78 higher than the national average. So
That's
Just to give
including
some
all,
context.
that's including all utilities, investor-owned and municipal.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Just to give some context.
All right. Anybody have any more questions for Nicole? All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Now, would anybody like to make a motion? Similar to the water one, I imagine, recommending rate increase, rate case for the electric utility.
Can I ask a question first regarding your questions on the benchmarks and variable versus fixed? So is there more information that's needed? I was just curious because you had a lot of questions that are outstanding, and so our decision is to decide on which of these three options, because we haven't really,
Yeah.
or is it to,
So we
so
can,
I just want just clarifying,
So we
because
could
you
do-
had left a lot of data requests on the table, so.
Just so the board is aware, if a decision is not made tonight, we will have to revamp the data because we will no longer be able to use this as the test year.
Okay.
We have to submit prior to August 1 in order to use the data that has been used as the test year.
That's
So we
exactly.
lost that meeting. So now we are a little bit, we have to get it to the city council at its next meeting, otherwise we'll have to redo it.
Thank you. Well, then I would like to put forward the motion to approve the recommendation of the electric utility cost of service study proposed in the materials discussed tonight.
So that's option one.
Option, which on the handout would be considered the proposed design
Yep.
that Nicole walked us through this evening, which would be option one on the handout.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion and second to propose the rate study as presented, which corresponds to the first option and the three options. So it's as presented. Any further discussion? Hearing none? Roll call, please.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Ms. Schmager,
Aye.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
So before this gets presented to city council, can we have some municipal comparisons as well? Fantastic, thank you.
The city council meeting is next week, Tuesday, at 7.
I think some of that's already in their annual report. We sent out in June,
Okay,
yeah. But it's already available. but-
good. Just have it presentable for city council to review.
And I would not file the application until after it passes through city council. I'll hold on to it until you have that approval.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right.
Thanks for your time tonight.
All right, moving on, item 8, recommendation for future agendas.
Go ahead, Mary. Want me to go?
Sure.
So, the comprehensive plan is going before council, I think, on Tuesday. And I thought there was a desire to present some things to Public Works, but the last meeting was canceled, and then we didn't cover anything in this meeting. Is there anything that needs to be covered by Public Works in the comprehensive plan?
We had a discussion.
There was a presentation by Dustin to the Public Works Board.
Okay,
I don't recall anything
so
requested.
that's pre-May then?
I believe, I don't recall the exact date, pre-May.
Yeah,
Yeah, it may have been
I'll tell you
April.
when.
And I don't believe the Public Works Board requested any additional information after that meeting.
Great, thank you. That was my question.
All right.
So, this past week, I got from the city of Muskego, where we have a location, I got this form to fill out called a sewer capacity assessment form. And they're counting our bathrooms and our people, how many full-time, how many part-time. And I just, apparently the city of Muskego is considering some upgrade to their sewage and treatment plant. And they're surveying everybody in the city about the bathrooms and stuff. And I just wondered, I don't seem to recall that coming up in our sewer and wastewater treatment plan discussions. And I just thought maybe, is that a form that you guys have an interest in? Is that a capacity issue that you might be interested in?
Not familiar. I typically, the calculations that Strand has done has been on population projections.
Okay,
Now-
that's what I thought, right.
It could be, and maybe I'm mistaken, but could it be that they were analyzing a certain basin in the collection system? Meaning, for example, the number of homes that are going to the Sandy Beach lift station or another lift station in the system, then that more detailed information might be helpful.
Okay.
But we can definitely look at the form.
I'll
and we'd
send
be
you
more
this
than-
form. I just wondered if you might have some interest in it.
Yes.
They're approaching I knew we were just looking at population, but they're approaching it, they're drilling down a little differently, and I thought, well, that might be some usage to you folks.
Right.
So
Definitely, we would like to see it.
I'll just email you the form.
Thank you. And yes, we did some similar things when we did the sewer study back in 2004.
Right.
Yeah, with regard to the lift stations.
Yeah, but now, right, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, anyone?
I have a few topics. I think it's important, given our recent conversations, that if we have it on maybe as a routine agenda item, even if there isn't much to report, but the next deliverables and topics of discussion for the wastewater treatment plant, that's a very large topic, and I feel if we don't touch on it once a month on whatever it is or isn't we are intending to come to conclusion on, I feel that like with deliverables or outstanding topics of discussion that we have on in front of us, I'm feeling like we'll be trying to catch up when I'll get us informed, and rather than, keeping us informed along the way. So I think that would be a recommendation of mine. The yard waste center, where we're at with that discussion, if there's anything that's yard waste center, and then what we are intending to do for the sidewalk plan. I know we had a working meeting that we had maybe earmarked, and so those are the three topics that I would like to propose for future.
Those bike lanes as well.
I'm sorry?
Bike lanes as well.
Okay, and bike lanes, or bike path planning, whatever our broad
It's part of the
conversation
transportation plan.
can be, would be an interest to me and us, I think.
For the wastewater treatment plant, we could have a standing item. We're waiting to see if we're successful for some federal assistance.
Yeah.
And that's essentially a holding pattern until we realize that. So we likely won't have an update for several months on
Okay.
that. That's really going to inform what our next steps can be, what those look like financially if the city is doing it without any grant funding. The others, they are on our list as well. So we will keep working on them. We have the CIP next month, which is going to monopolize a lot of the staff's time in order to get that ready for presentation at the August meeting. So we will do our best, but the summer is it's the busy time for our public works staff. So as we get into budget season, the yard waste site will also factor into the future budget discussions as well. So all things that are on our minds, we're just trying to coordinate them with the different moving items we have.
Great. On the wastewater treatment plant, are there any, or is there any work that we can do on a scenario planning basis? So the scenario that if you don't get the federal grant, we have at least a straw man set of pencil kind of points kind of ready to go. And likewise, if we get the grant, we've got some familiar, is that some work that, that's kind of what I'm suggesting. Even though we're in a holding pattern, is there something that we can be doing to support and help you move forward so that we aren't, so that we're more prepared and would just be something of interest?
If you recall Travis Anderson's last presentation from Strand,
Yep.
There were some layouts for particularly related to the existing site. If the city received no additional funding, that would be what we would probably pursue further. So if
Okay.
you go back and look at that presentation, it'll kind of show the two paths. If we got significant federal funding, the best technical solution remains a new site at a new location. Without any
Okay.
federal funding, the last analysis showed that we would have the highest rates in the state, which the last conversation we had with the Public Works Board, that was not a viable solution. And so Strand has both of those routes kind of preliminarily thought through. It's just a question of which path are we going to go on. And right now we're at the whim of the federal budget until we have some more information.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my topics.
Maybe you'll have an update on replacing Paul Hermanson next month.
Yep, we have, I believe, scheduled interviews with candidates, so we should be seeing some people next week. So hopefully soon, fingers crossed.
Anything else?
If I may, both topics, the comp plan and the wastewater treatment plan was the May meeting. So
Yeah,
if you're exploring old meeting minutes or videos,
Thank you.
That's the one to go to.
Anything else on future agendas? If not, we'll move to item 9 and declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
thanks, Mark.